online to this event entitled Accelerating Adaptation, Water for a Climate Resilient Africa. This is being co-organized by my organization, AGWA, also by the Global Water Partnership, the Adaptation Action Coalition, and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom. So, first of all, congratulations, everyone. We've made it to the end of the ESPYs, almost. We have the final plenary tomorrow, but today's the last day of events. It's been a really busy, really packed 2 weeks. I know I've felt like there's been a ton going on, especially being here in person for the first time since 2019. And also, for those of you who've been following the events here in Bonn, you'll probably recognize how high adaptation has actually been raised on the agenda. And it feels like just a couple years ago, it was very hard to get it on the agenda, and it wasn't really being talked about as much as it's being talked about now. So that's really great. Just a couple examples from the past 2 weeks for those who aren't here. We had the first workshop of the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the Global Goal on Adaptation, or GLAS. And then we also had the Global Stocktake Technical Dialogues, which included a roundtable on adaptation. And I was super lucky, actually, to be able to participate in both of these. And one of the things that kept being raised by parties, by observers, by the technical experts who were presenting, and also by the co-facilitators, is a call for more transformative and systems approaches to climate adaptation. And that is something actually that we're going to be talking about here tonight. And we're talking about it through the lens of water, but really what we're talking about are transforming our systems through the lens of water to both adapt and also mitigate the impacts of climate change. And I just wanted to call out also the IPCC Working Group 2 report that came out earlier this year. Water was everywhere in that as well. And they really called out the fact that water is at the center of climate adaptation and mitigation work. And so today we're specifically talking about water in the African context, and we're going to have a few really great case studies coming up from our partners. And actually, I think it's great that this event is taking place here at the end of the ESPY, because we really see this as a bridge between COP26 in Glasgow and COP27 that will be taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. And so before I bring on our first distinguished speaker, just for some background, for those of you who might not be familiar, there's a couple of programs that we're going to be talking about today. And the first of those is called the Water Tracker. So the Water Tracker for National Climate Planning is a tool and diagnostic guide to help countries assess and enhance water resilience in their national climate plans. This is a relatively new initiative under the Adaptation Action Coalition's water workstream, and it comes from the perspective that water is really the lifeblood of society, the economy, the natural environment, but that with increasing competition for limited water resources, there will be difficult trade-offs that we need to manage between agriculture, environment, energy, water and sanitation. And so how can we actually manage these trade-offs if we don't really understand where water is being used in the system? And that includes for adaptation and mitigation activities. So if we want our NDCs and our NAPs to be successful in the long term, we really have to understand how water is being managed at that systems level. So it's, again, talking about systems transformation. This is also a part of a larger project called the Global Water Leadership Project program, which was initiated in May of 2021. And that is being managed primarily by our partners at GWPO. And his primary focus is to support governments in implementing impactful and inclusive climate resilient water policies and strategies that will result in better served and more climate resilient communities. So again, trying to move away from a siloed approach, trying to be more integrated in our approaches to managing water. So it's very complementary to what we're doing with the Water Tracker tool, and the 3 case studies that you're going to hear in just a minute are all countries that are working with this Water Tracker tool right now. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first distinguished speaker. It's Mr. Gerard Howe, who is the director of the new Adaptation, Nature and Resilience Department within the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Officer. Gerard was very influential in COP26, and so looking forward to hearing his perspective on adaptation and resilience in water coming out of the COP and as we move forward. Gerard, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ingrid and colleagues. I'm taking you can hear me effectively. I can just about see you, Ingrid, so yes.
Yes, hear you great.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. And like Ingrid, I would just say congratulations on getting towards the end of the SBs. I was in Bonn last week. I'm now back in Glasgow, where many of you were what might feel like a long time ago for COP26, but the city still resonates with a lot of the success and vibrancy of COP26. So on behalf of the UK, we're really delighted to be here and to be part of this discussion, including in our role as co-chair alongside our good colleagues from Egypt of the Adaptation Action Coalition. And in particular, and you've already spoken a little bit to this, Ingrid, because this agenda really speaks to what we see as being so vital in the next 6 months to come, which is that focus on implementation. I know our colleagues in Egypt are bringing that to their presidency at COP27. But with 6 months to go, as Ingrid said, we saw this incredible platform that was built at 26, largely through to the efforts of so many people that are on this call and more broadly, to really bring adaptation to the sort of scale, or at least at the start of the scale and visibility that we all know it needs to have. But now as we move forward from that platform, it is demonstrating the fact that our planning, our finance and our systems are all delivering on that platform that was so hard won at 26. And in a sense, water is absolutely critical to this, again, as Ingrid has already set out. And in many ways, water is unique in advancing multiple challenges in responding to climate change. We know that the issues on the scale of water scarcity, 800 million to 3 billion people suffering water scarcity at relatively minor temperature increases, but also water's role across mitigation and a whole set of strategies. So it speaks directly to the point that Ingrid's making about the need to take an integrated and systemic approach. And that's why I think it's really so exciting. And as the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, we're delighted to support AGWA on the Water Tracker because in its own right, it's valuable. And we'll hear much more about that. And I'm really excited to hear from the country case studies, but also because it's emblematic of many of the things that we know that we're going to need to do collectively as we go forward, because it starts to provide evidence base for decision makers on the trade-offs that are going to be required in policy and programming, because it helps to think about how do we pursue water in an integrated way across adaptation and mitigation planning, because it builds both the credibility of actions and the efficacy of those actions. And ultimately also because it contributes to the learning that we know we all need in getting to that transformative and systems-based approach. I mean, nobody said any of this stuff is easy, right? Particularly to do it at the scale and in the time frame that we need to do it at. And therefore, learning lies absolutely at the heart of what we need to do, and providing evidence that shares that learning and that improves both the product at a country level and more broadly is really, really important. We're delighted to see the progress that's underway on the Water Tracker. Again, we're going to hear from colleagues in Malawi and Egypt on that, and just huge congratulations. More broadly, we as the UK were really also delighted to sign the Fair Water Footprint Declaration at COP26, along with a really wide range of partners, because we see that as a unique partnership across government, private sector partners, multinational companies, investors and civil society to think about improving water stewardship and delivering water across the piece in a way that's fair, sustainable and really delivers benefits. So At the heart of today's discussion, I think, is hearing from our partners at country level. I'd encourage people, we hope that even more people will be able to join the Water Tracker through this and other events. Huge thanks to AGWA for helping lead through this. And the UK is fiercely committed to supporting further work on the Water Tracker, because we can see the potential and the progress that's already been achieved, but also how it will help deliver a broader set of objectives as we move to scale and increase impact on the adaptation ahead for us all. Ingrid, back to you, and I look forward to the discussion very much indeed. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gerard, for those comments. And I especially want to pick up on what you were saying about learning and providing evidence. And that's again another big thing that's been raised over the last 2 weeks, especially as we're going through starting this global stocktake process of understanding what work is actually happening already, where we're at, where there are gaps, opportunities, et cetera. And one of the things that the Water Tracker is designed to do is to understand, again, and provide a baseline for countries of where they are in terms of water-related adaptation and where there are opportunities for enhancement moving forward, and then to work together peer-to-peer through workshops, through trainings, et cetera, to learn and to provide a stronger evidence base for this. So thank you so much again for the FCDO support for this project, and we really look forward to working with you towards COP27 and beyond. So next, we're actually going to, we are waiting. So as anyone who has been to an SB or to a COP knows, multiple things are happening at the same time. So we're really excited to have Director, I should say, Ephraim Shitma from the African Group of Negotiators from the UNFCCC, but he's actually negotiating right now. So he said he would be here at roughly this time. We will make space for him whenever he is able to join us. But in the interest of time, we'll wait for him to arrive. But we will skip ahead and go right into the heart of our discussion today and start our case study presentations. So our first case study presentation is going to come from Egypt, from our COP president designate, Dr. Iman Suleiman, who is the director for the who's the director of the planning sector within the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation in Egypt, is joining us virtually. Dr. Iman, min fadlak, the floor is yours. I will pull up your slides in just a second.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank you, Ingrid, and actually congratulate you for this nice event. I hope that you give me one.
Yes, we can hear you well. I'm just working on your slides.
Okay. So let me start with, I would like to give you an idea about Egypt and how Egypt is tackling the water issues, especially under the climate change. And as you can see from my first slide, Egypt is characterized by water scarcity, and we have a population over than 100 million Egyptians live in Egypt. Most of the map of Egypt is yellow color, as we have 98% of Egypt is desert. We are having on the River Nile as a source of the fresh water. Our dependency on River Nile is about 87% of water is drought-bound. We have seen a severe impact of climate change. As you can see in the map, we have subjected to sea level rise at the northern border of Egypt, and from the south we receive a variability of the Nile flow and sensitivity to Nile flow changes. In the western part, we receive hot and dry weather. We have also heat waves, thunderstorms, and a lot of dry conditions. However, in the eastern part, we receive in winter a severe extreme weather event causes flash flood in Sinai and Red Sea. We have the water index more than 170% of our index representing a very scarce situation in Egypt. Any deficit in our water resources, and actually we have deficit about 34% billion cubic meter each year. So we have to deal and to have a lot of investment in the water sector to fulfill the gap between the demand and resources. In the same time, any loss of 1 billion cubic meter of the Nile flows will cause losing of 200,000 acres of cultivated land in the Nile Delta, and losing 1 million jobs for our citizens. This makes Egypt, next slide please, Ingrid. This makes Egypt focus on addressing the impact of climate change in the water sector, and we have different stages. We started with strategies for climate change, and we have started formulating a strategy for dealing with climate change in 2011, and we updated recently in 2020, and we have also different plans starting from NWRB to 2037. Also, we have implementation for the adaptation measure coming out from our plans started 5 years ago, and we have monitoring and follow-up system where the water tracker helping us also to find where are in the adaptation and in the mitigation for the water sector, and how we can adjust our way of fulfilling the adaptation and to serve our citizens. Next, please. Just highlight about our NWRB, which is the National Water Resource Plan. The time horizon is 20 years up to 2037. Our main objective is water security for all up to year 2037. We have 4 pillars: creating and enabling environment to apply the plan, and also developing new water resources, enhancing the water quality, and rationalizing water use. We started the implementation for all those pillars, and we can, as we can see in the next slide, we started ambitious implementation and a mega project. Please, Ingrid. Samples of those projects as follow. We have the National Project for Canal Rehabilitation. This project started 2 years ago, and we have goal to rehabilitate 2,000 kilometers of canals. This project enable people for job creation and also to avail water at the end of the canal. As you can see in the left side of the picture, this is the current situation of canals. After rehabilitation, we have on the right side, the canal is more reasonable, and we rehabilitate the cross section. We are able to deliver the water to the end of canals, and also to control the quantity. We are saving lands. We are able to cultivate more lands. The next slide showing another mega project, which is shifting from modern, from flood irrigation to modern and smart irrigation system. As you know, in Egypt, we used to have flood irrigation for all our delta and valley lands. We started this project 1 year ago. We have now able to transfer 1.2 million faddan. The farmers from this project able to increase the productivity by 30% of their original productivity, and also they save a lot of fertilizer, which is also have another benefit, which is reducing the emission from using extra fertilizers. We are able also to introduce using soil moisture devices and using smart irrigation for those poor farmers, and they are able now to increase their income. So this is the second project. The third one, next image, please. Also, we depended from 4 years ago on the use of water treated, the drainage water treatment plant. We have now 3 mega projects in eastern and in western part. We have billion cubic meter to be treated and to be used by end of the projects. We already finalized 2 of them, Bahr al-Ba'r and Mahsaba, and now we are working on the third one, which is El Hamban. By ending those projects, we will reach about 45% of reuse of our renewable water resources, so which is a huge amount of reuse and also very promising projects. We believe that Egypt is pioneer in this area. Next, Angel. A flash flood protection program where we also started our adaptation for extreme weather event, and we are able to implement about 1,500 small construction dams and mountain lakes. Those projects enable our colleagues in remote areas to use those water in all over the year for drinking and also for agriculture, and also reduce the impact of damage due to the flash flood. The next one, Angel, please. Next slide, please. For the sea level rise, also maybe all people know that Alexandria and Port Said are subjected to a severe impact of sea level rise, and we have studied different scenarios where we have a scenario introduced a submersion of a big portion of delta, and maybe about 5 million people will lose their houses and their lands if we leave delta without any protection. However, we have some analysis, and we are able to make an integrated coastal plan for the coastal area. We identified areas where we have high risk and medium risk and low risk. We started the implementation. As you can see in the next slide, we have here a program for protection of the low areas with natural-based solution and low-cost methods. Those technologies helped us to protect people and farmers in those areas and to save their lands. Next, please. Also, we started to use solar energy for operating groundwater well. As you know, in Egypt, the groundwater is a fossil resource, and we're keen to keep the groundwater for sustainability use for our new generation. Using the solar energy serve as post-adaptation mitigation in this area, and we are able to let our colleagues in remote areas to use groundwater in limited time, only in the time of having the solar, the sun. Next one. At the same time, we started a strategic decision to replace all the coastal cities to use desal water, and also started desalination program for the coastal area, where we have a new plan will be implemented up to year 2030, and also to extend and to rehabilitate a lot of existing desalination stations. The program will serve up to 2050 to add about 3 billion cubic meter of desal water to coastal area. However, it's costly, but we don't have any other choices. We have this decision to focus on availing the surface water for cities around the Nile, and also for the coastal area to use only desal planet. This is kind of very costly decision, but we had to. Next one, Indra. Also using technologies and using tools for water management, we have started the water accounting with the help of different UN organizations and also different donors. We have now using satellite images to follow up the growing of different crops, and also to allocate water based on the actual needs, and also using telemetry to follow up the levels of water in canals, and to allocate water based on actual needs. Early warning, either for extreme weather events or for drought. We are able to save a lot of money based on this early warning system, helped us to save citizens. 5 years ago, we have a severe impact on Western Delta due to one of the extreme weather events. Nowadays, we are able to alert all citizens before any storm with 3 days, and this helps us to save either water and also save citizens. Last but not least, the last slide, we are talking about effort to integrate water into climate actions. Actually, Egypt, as we are going to host COP27, we have several activities to talking about climate change and how we are tackling the climate change in the water sector, starting from Cairo Water Week, which will be held mid of October 2022. And also we are working with our colleague from Ministry of Foreign Affairs in formulating water initiative will focus mainly on adaptation and also early warning and early action. Also, Egypt is hosting the water pavilion, and now we are working with different organizations to have the pavilion successful as last year, formulating a water day where we are going to have full day talking about water and how water could be integrated with the climate action. And the last event, we are going to have our input to the UN Water midterm review report, and we have coordination with different organizations to have our point of view how we can accelerate achieving SDGs. And we have one of our main outcomes is the climate change and integrating climate change to our main report. Thank you, and looking forward to see you either in Cairo Water Week or in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Thank you, Dr. Aman, for that comprehensive overview of the work that Egypt is doing. There's so much going on that it's hard to synthesize, but I wonder if you could maybe just quickly, if you had to kind of think of like one of the biggest challenges that you face in terms of integrating water more centrally into Egypt's climate planning, what would you say is the biggest challenge you're facing currently?
Actually, for integrating water in climate strategy and climate actions, I guess we are focused on the finance. Actually, most of our measures needs a huge amount of finance and need big investment. Now we are working with different ministries to see how we can avail fund and sustainable fund, not only the fund, but we need to have sustainable fund and innovative fund for, now we are working with different banks and NGOs to support farmers to transform to modern irrigation. We seek also to increase our capacity to attract more fund from climate facility, either Green Climate Fund or climate adaptation, to support us implementing our huge ambition for water adaptation sector.
Thank you. Yes, great that you brought up the issue of finance, because we will actually be hearing from GWP on this in just a little bit. So more to come on some innovative finance solutions. Obviously, that's something that's been raised a lot here. It's raised at the COP every year, and the conversation about climate finance does continue. So I have a couple of other questions that I would like to ask you, but I'm actually going to save those for a little bit later, and we will move on for now. And actually, it's perfect timing. We will actually go now back in time. So I'm going to move the slides. If you're ready to speak.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect timing. So as I mentioned earlier for the folks online as well, now we will be hearing from Director Ephraim Shitima, who is the chair of the African Group of Negotiators for the UNFCCC right now, so he's incredibly busy. He's also the Director for Climate Change and Natural Resources in Zambia. So, Director, please, if you would like to tell us a little bit more about your work both in Zambia on adaptation and water, and also your thinking as these negotiations are hopefully coming to a close, or at least the conversations are coming to a close for now, heading towards COP27, what you see as kind of some of the key initiatives for the COP, please.
Thank you very much. And first of all, let me apologize for coming a bit late. I had an overrun in the scheduling, just coming from another meeting. And thank you for the invitation to come to this discussion. I think that accelerating adaptation in the water sector is critical if we are to address climate change across the globe, but it's more important actually when you refer to Africa, because water is a critical resource, and a number of impacts actually that we're addressing in a lot of sectors are related to water. If you take most of the projects that you may find across the world, and in Africa included, they may be framed as adaptation in the agricultural sector, for example. But when you interrogate those, in the end, the actual activities that you find will be related to water. It will be about water conservation, probably irrigation to improve in terms of crops that can be grown when there is water stress, the selection of crop varieties that are either drought resistant and all that. So you find that the bottom line, it is the water situation that you are dealing with. And so it is very important that we address the adaptation in water and accelerate that if we are to build a resilient response to the challenge. Maybe just a bit in terms of the national context, even in the Zambian context, it is an important sector. We did our first, in fact, it is the only one. If you recall, we started with national adaptation programs of action in the mid-2000s, about 2006 to 2007, which we are focusing on the most immediate and urgent adaptation needs. And in the Zambian context, when we did our analysis in terms of identifying what are the sectors that are most vulnerable, because of the scope of that adaptation program, which was the immediate and most urgent, so you had to prioritize what are the sectors that you're going to focus on. You would realize that water was on top of our list of sectors. And of course you had agriculture, you had energy. But as I said, you find that even with these sectors, water is an underlying factor. Because even for energy, some of the challenges that we've faced in the past few years, being a country that is broadly reliant on hydropower generated, it is the reduction in generating capacity due to droughts. And then you have the energy as a resultant crisis when you start rationing the power supply just to ensure that you don't go off completely. So it is an important part. And in our case, we are formulating a national adaptation plan to build on that NAP of 2007. And of course, we are working in two parts. At the moment, yes, what we are dealing with is a cross-cutting plan that will address all the sectors. But we intend to have a targeted sector NAP that will target focus on water, so that we give adequate attention to water as a critical issue. Maybe now I can just turn to the negotiations in terms of where we are. And yes, it's the last evening of the process. Tomorrow we expect to close, and probably that will be the right time to take stock in terms of how much we've achieved, what has worked and what hasn't worked. As you know, in this process, it's very difficult to gauge the success, particularly in these late hours. There is a lot of work that is still going on in the different rooms, probably late this night. And so you only get the idea after the full picture emerges, because there is an adage in this process of nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So at the moment you may get a mixed feeling of areas where progress is being made and other areas where progress may not be so significant, but you find that it's only at the end that you find the loose ends tying up together. But maybe just to indicate, maybe in my concluding remarks, that As you know, we are preparing for a COP27, which will be in Egypt, and of course it is being dubbed as an implementation COP, and we hope that we can focus on the implementation. And when you are talking of implementation in Africa, and you are in Africa, and particularly in Egypt, I think we understand the history and how Egypt has managed its water resources, for example, not having a lot of it, but managing very well with prudent water resources management. One would expect that adaptation, and even in the water sector, would be one of the key focus areas of work and expected outcomes. So we're looking forward to making progress here so that we create a good basis for a positive outcome at COP27, because it depends so much on the progress that will be made here. Because as you know, at the COP, we've had sufficient time here because we have 2 weeks of technical work, but at the COP, largely because we have the high-level segment where our ministers, and in this case, even our heads of state, come, it reduces the amount of technical work that we can do, and the focus is largely now on the policymakers providing guidance. So we are hoping that much of the progress by tomorrow as we close will have been made so that we have a good basis for achieving outcomes that we can all be proud of at COP27. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for those remarks. I just wanted to also flag, of course, that there will be the Africa Regional Climate Week coming up, I believe, the last week of August in Gabon as well. So they will be able to continue the discussions happening, especially talking in the African context about different adaptation strategies and actions. So if you have not attended a Regional Climate Week before, I'd highly recommend it. There is a lot of good discussion that happens, less negotiation-oriented, less process, and more, as you say, about implementation, because really that's the direction that we need to be headed in now. And I just want to use this opportunity to also highlight and showcase the good work I know that Zambia is doing specifically on ecosystem-based adaptation around wetlands. Their Ramsar wetlands are a huge area of concern for lives, livelihoods, and also the ecosystem. And so if you're not familiar with the work that's going on there, I would definitely recommend checking it out, because you guys are really kind of at the forefront on developing good ecosystem-based adaptation projects. So hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, that's very true. The Africa Climate Week is in that last week of August, getting into September. And also probably after that in October. As you know, there is also what is called the pre-COP, although this is largely for the ministers. That would be in the DRC, in the Congo DR, that would be in the first week of October. But all these are to build up to the COP27 later in the month. And indeed, thank you again. Yes, we're doing what we can do in terms of adaptation, ecosystems-based adaptation, the preparation of our NAP itself, which is, we are working very closely with the Global Water Partnership as our delivery partner, and we are very grateful for the collaboration that we're having. But ecosystem-based adaptation is also key, because there we're trying to combine how you deal with conserving the wetlands, restoring them, but also addressing the livelihood issues of the people around some of the critical Ramsar sites in the country. So thank you very much again, and I appreciate it for the invitation.
Yes, thank you for taking the time, and we'll of course let you get back to your hopefully not too late evening, but best of luck with the rest of the negotiations. Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for being flexible with the scheduling today. We're going to go back to our case study presentations and go to Somalia. And so next we are going to hear from Mr. Najib Abdullahi, who's an environmental safeguard specialist within the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources from Somalia. Najib, can you hear us?
I hope I'm loud enough.
Yes, I can hear you. I'll get your slides.
Thanks.
All right, ready when you are.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you for inviting me to speak and participate in this great platform. Fellow panelists, organizers, viewers, and audiences around the globe, good evening to you all. Very happy to share with you our unique cases of Somalia in relation to water, climate, and resilience. Ingrid, maybe next slide, please. I'm going to, within the interest of time and all the protocol observed, I'm going to briefly share with you a couple of issues related to how climate change is affecting Somalia, while I'm going to highlight what is happening now and what we have experienced for the past years and for the past decades. And also some of the projections. Also going to briefly share about the conditions of the Somali water and climate change and how what is affecting climate change is affecting the water sector. And then I will also share with you one of the several examples of the ongoing intervention projects that the government is implementing in relation to enhancing water resilience. And finally, I'm also going to highlight some of the government agendas and investment priorities in the water sector. Next slide, please. And then finally, I'm going to invite your thoughts and your comments and questions. While we wait for the next slide, Somalia actually is not considered to be water scarce. And when we think about the climate change, this risk multiplier effect, which has input now, we are experiencing humanitarian conditions as a result of our current droughts, part of the extreme events due to fail in precipitation or reduction in precipitation is received for past 2 years. More than 7 million Somalis are in destitute conditions, and that is almost 50%, 60% of the Somali population are now facing humanitarian emergencies due to shortage of water, pasture, and also food insecurity. Also, for the past years, this is normally the aftermath of every drought. We also experience floods and runoff that also affects our communities. Next slide, please. And when we look at the current conditions, this is also maybe next, among other climate conditions, is also the locust invasions, and that also affected our communities, actually hugely affected the productivity of the agricultural sector, as well as the rangeland, which is feeds the backbone of our economy, the livestock and agriculture. One is wondering the water aspect in the Somali, and through the history, Somalia has suffered huge droughts. And if we look at our climate adaptation capacity analysis or our climate aspect, one can circle immediately the water aspect being the key when it comes to finding durable solutions in the climate crisis, as well as water being one of the factors that also leads to human crisis in terms of displacement. Somalia actually is water sufficient nation. Yes, it locates in arid and semi-arid land. Most of it is land, but it also has vast resource when it comes to groundwater that, if properly managed and properly developed, could water and the whole nation. The issue we have also is the water quality in terms of the content in salinity, fluoride, and contaminations. Somalia also receives immense amount of water through transboundary aquifers, mainly the rivers, mainly from Ethiopia, the rivers Juba and Shabelle. For the past decade, they have been the water table has been getting lowered in the river, sometimes even dried up, and kids could play soccer in the riverbed. That also shows us that we have a strong linkage with the upstream downstream relations with Ethiopia, and that also leads us to build partnership and Horn of Africa partnership in terms of negotiating the water. Also, the rivers also cause flooding in the riverine areas. Climate change is also affecting the surface water. In every structure we built around utilizing the runoff in terms of Hafir dams or water dams or sand dams. We think about the strong winds and the surface temperature that is also increasing, which leads to evaporation and also depleting the water in very short period of time, sometimes less than 2, 3, or 1 to 2 months. Next slide, please, Ingrid. The water scarcity in terms of Somalia, if you now look at the numbers, if you can please click again. Somalia's scarcity in water scarcity is related to several factors. I just mentioned the climate aspect, but the geographical location is also another factor. But another factor is the land-related or the environmental factors. Somalia is leading among the leading nations when it comes to environmental degradation and land degradation, mainly tree cutting and deforestation, as more than 80%, close to 90% of our communities, you can click again, Ingrid, I have more pictures to appear. But deforestation and charcoal burning actually contributes to clearing of forests and tree cover, which in turn increases the runoff. The poor water infrastructure, this is to blame the fact that Somalia has not had effective government, political stability for the past 2-3 decades, and the former structures was being destroyed by the effects of climate change and as a result of the war. If you now look at the population is actually growing, and it's one of the factors that are also affecting the access to water. In recent reports published by UNICEF and other UN agencies, it showed that access to water is about 52% of the Somali population, and that shows that we are in crisis, because 52% are only managing to get water, and almost other 50 or 48% of the population cannot afford to get enough clean water. It's also worthy to mention the fact that we had 6 droughts and 8 flooding incidences for the past 2-3 decades. Now you can go to the next slide, please. It's also worthy to note that our communities directly depend on nature and on ecosystems, and that is in livelihoods, in our economy. One extreme event, one drought incident in 2016-17 was the total losses and damages was estimated to be around more than $3 billion. The environment alone was estimated to be 600 million losses and damages. And that shows us that And in every incident, climate incident we receive, we experience, we are faced by economic losses, social and other exposure to disaster to our communities. Somalia is also, in this slide, it summarizes the existing key country commitments and targets, mainly environment, climate, and development. National Development Plan, 5 years, the poverty reduction strategy. This is also part of the ongoing process for the past 5 years as part of debt clearance. The NDC, we have revised our NDC, and luckily, for the first time, we have included water as a priority in the adaptation sector, together with the public health, and it's estimated to be around, it requires $15 billion US. The land degradation neutrality also attributes and affects the water quality and water availability. And the national water strategy, we will see that in the next slides. And also we have other sector policies, plans and strategies, the water, the agriculture, livestock, environment, water strategies and policies. Next slide, please. The ongoing water projects and interventions. This is just an example. Next slide, please. This is just some selected projects that are happening in the country from different partners and from different donors. Thanks to GIZ, World Bank, Germany, UN, UNDP, Swedish, UK, and Italy. All these projects and programs are in line with our National Development Plan, the NDC, and the former INDC, and also the water strategy, the National Water Strategy. These are, if you look at it, surface water, it covers surface groundwater, it also covers aspects to do with enhancing the governance, and we will see how important for Somalia to be supported in the areas of institutional and water governance. Next slide, please, Ingrid. Some of these projects actually have showed us huge social economic returns. For example, I recall one of the projects funded by the World Bank. It was a 1 million support, and I remember at the end of the project, studies showed that 1 million has led to socio-economic returns that was estimated to be more than 5.3 million economic returns, and that shows us that if properly invested, these water projects and interventions could be generating maximum returns to the communities and authorities. And now, the National Water Strategy is a lifeline when it comes to water interventions in Somalia, thanks to the former government of Somalia, the former Prime Minister, who put under his leadership, put priority in the water sector. And I recall the first meeting, he raised this question: why Somalia is water stressed nation? And then the issue of water governance stood up among the other factors, and this has led to the need to establish this strategy. This strategy contains about 13 flagship projects, and what I like about this strategy is not just commitments and targets, but it also contains straightforward flagship projects which will translate our priorities into bankable projects which will have impact in the ground, and this is what I would like to. So if you now look at flagship 0, it's about enhancing the government's capacity, and this is what we wanted in the first place. These priority flagship projects is at enhancing, ensuring coordination, strengthening the capacity, and as well as I mentioned, having impact on the ground, and as well it emphasizes the aspect of the interrelationship between water, environment, climate, disaster risk management, as well as sustainable development. Next slide, please, Ingrid.
Yeah, and Najib, if you could actually wrap it up in the next 2 minutes. I'm sorry, we're running a little bit behind, so that we still have 2 more presentations. Thanks.
And if you now jump to maybe next slide, because I've mentioned all these aspects, maybe I need to mention, next slide please, Ingrid. Maybe you can go to the government priorities, the last slide, and Somalia needs effective partnership when it comes to investing water priorities, and I can mention the short and long-term priorities. Short being, now we are facing critical conditions, so ensuring we save lives before we reach into death of our communities. And this constitutes from water governance to having impact and strengthening resilience at community level is what my government is prioritizing. And finally, I also want to mention the fact that we consider water to be the center and the hub when translating actions into our SDGs, climate change, the NDC now, and also the disaster risk reduction policy and priorities. With that, allow me to stop here and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much, and now invite your comments and your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Najib.
Over to you.
Thank you so much for that impressive presentation, and especially I love where you ended it, talking about the integration of climate, sustainable development, and DRR through water. That is, again, what the Water Tracker project is all about, and we're really excited to have Somalia as the newest Water Tracker country. So we will quickly move to the last case study presentation that we have for today, and that is from Malawi. And we should have Jonathan Rollins on the line. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Hi, Ingrid. I'm here.
Great. I'm just getting your slides. But the floor is yours.
Right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Rollins. As you might know, I've been working very closely for the past 6 months or so with the Malawian government. Unfortunately, we were unable to get Director Kambua to present here today. But I'm very happy and proud to be sharing some of the findings from our results and some of the key adaptation actions that we think might be a good learning opportunity going forward. So just briefly, why Malawi? I know everyone tends to have an introductory slide arguing why their region is more impacted by climate than others, but Malawi really is one of the global hotspots, always in the top 3 or 5 or 6 sometimes in the different risk indices, affected by drought, rainfall, multiplicity of transboundary impacts and influences. The Lake Malawi is one of the most central components to their economy, and water really is the underpinning driver from a climate perspective, but also from an economic development perspective, with over 80% of the economy and the people in the economy who are formally and informally employed in agriculture. So there's an urgent need in Malawi to ensure that national climate planning is really building water resilience at the same time. Thank you. Next. And then just, we could run through these maps all day, but to give you an indication, I mean, the drought and flood mortality risk indices for Malawi are really off the charts. So some of the areas in this country experience almost drought and flood is basically the norm. And this is leading to some of the largest impacts on human life and development. So where do we start? With the water tracker, we had to identify some priority entry points from a country perspective. The recently published towards the end of last year, the Nationally Determined Contribution, which has been at least across Africa, but globally renowned as a really big step forward and one of the top most ambitious NDCs that I've come across at least, and very targeted at some of these key sectors. a recently developed national water policy as well towards the end of last year. It's a strategy on climate change learning, the Malawi 2063 development plan, national adaptation plan framework as well, a very comprehensive national resilience strategy that covers every sector, as well as integrating cross-cutting themes, and then the two main climate change policies. And these were the core focus of the water tracker document or assessment, and gave us a really in-depth insight into understanding the extent to which water has been integrated into climate change planning processes to date. So just to summarize some interesting findings, there was a whole myriad of findings which we've been through a fairly intensive verification and validation process with various line ministries. But some interesting findings that might be relevant to share globally are there's a key focus in Malawi on capacity building, and this is a core tenet that followed through with a single thread across every document that we focused on, and this is both in terms of climate change planning as well as integration of water. These are key for building local institutional capacity, and this is identified in every single document together with monitoring and monitoring evaluation processes related to capacity development, which we thought was really progressive. Data and information is then another thread which was pulled across almost every single document. We all know you can't manage what you can't measure, but it's easy to say that, but to have some practical policy issuance and directives, as well as planning strategic processes to collect information and share this with the right people at the right time is really difficult to do. And despite the nascency and the chronic underfunding of some of these systems, which is clearly recognized across Malawi, there's a clear plan and roadmap for developing these data and information systems, from weather and information systems to water resource management systems and allocation management, etc. However, on the flip side, a couple of opportunities or areas for potential improvement are focused around how climate change and water risk and opportunities are manifest throughout these plans, and particularly in terms of how they're prioritized and specific actions and policy directives are prioritized. No clear prioritization against areas such as risk, exposure, sensitivity, or either metrics which are significantly different across different geographic regions in the country. These did not provide a clear evidence base in many cases. However, the NDC did go a long way towards correcting a lot of these, as there's quite a strong risk assessment process in the NDC. And then lastly, the importance of wetlands is perhaps overlooked, both to sustainable development as well as climate adaptation and mitigation. There's a wealth of knowledge and in-depth understanding, both local indigenous knowledge as well as scientific knowledge in the academic domain around how dumbos, particularly the type of wetlands, contribute towards both economic and environmental development in Malawi, and these were very notably underrepresented in these climate plans. Some key recommendations going forward, as always, institutionalizing, engaging at the highest level really came out as one of the top areas to get some key buy-in from high level policy decision makers and policy influencers going forward is the main way that we identified as getting this type of tool onto the agenda. It's all good and well working with all the technocrats who understand the nuances with everything that's happening, the different policy directives and the different technical aspects. However, to really get traction, we needed to take this a bit higher. And then also a key recommendation that came through is to use the tracker as a learning tool, to use it to build capacity both on policy and planning analysis, to teach people and institutions and groups and technical working committees and such on how to integrate water into climate change planning. It's as much a diagnostic tool as it can be used as a tool post assessment. Looking at developing the water tracker tool iteratively, having a baseline assessment is all good and well and very helpful and can give you some initial recommendations. But really where the power in this type of assessment lies is in continual analysis using this tool, continually bettering your integration of water into your climate plans, and then assessing it again and understanding how that progress is being made. And ultimately, this leads to the final recommendation is for Malawi, particularly to apply the water tracker tool as a policy and planning development tool. So learning, continually to do it, and then use it as a policy development tool, because it provides a key area for understanding gaps and opportunities in terms of policy directives. And as policies, plans, and strategies are being developed, this tool really provides a clear, evidence-based guideline as to how to integrate water into these climate change planning documents. So just to go over one good practice example of adaptation that is commonly referenced in Malawi is the MWASIP project. It's a World Bank project, the Malawi Watershed Services Improvement Project. Some of you in the room or online might have heard of this before. It's a large $157 million project, ultimately focused on improving sustainable landscape management, focused on the watershed services and target watersheds, such as the Shira watershed in the southern part of Malawi, as well as some others. If you're not familiar with the biophysical nature of the country, erosion, soil loss, and land degradation are significantly hampering the development, both economically and socially, of the country. The soil loss is significant, and it's further being exacerbated by changes in climate, both from a temperature and rainfall standpoint. And this project has really been progressive in the way that it's looked at multiple pillars of development, and not just focused necessarily on one underlying root cause, for example, trying to restore these river basins to reduce erosion. It's really taken more of a landscape approach and an integrated view, where they're currently focusing on restoring a significant portion of these degraded landscapes, but working closely with these farmer groups and agri-enterprises who are the stewards of this land, the owners and the local communities. They're ensuring to maximize the benefits to people through the development of bankable opportunities and solutions across the landscape, to make sure that watershed management institutions are capacitated. They have the facilities and the resources to build infrastructure, to have the climate information services available, again, connected to the data and information finding from the water tracker. And then lastly, to ensure that the findings, the information, and the results of the projects over time can be prepared through technical project management. Building capacity on both biophysical and ecological monitoring to understand how changes in a certain capacity might have a particular outcome, and to attribute those changes, understanding impact, and ultimately to project manage support and incremental operating costs as time goes on. This project has really been identified by a multitude of stakeholders, both inside and outside the government in Malawi, as really a flagship project in the country that is looking to address a multitude of socioeconomic problems, but with one of the core environmental issues at heart. And we all know how important water is to this story. It really is the glue that pulls all of this together. So I'll say thank you there, and welcome any questions and points of discussion.
Thank you so much, Shanti, for that really clear example of how the water tracker has been used in Malawi to assess a number of different plans, to identify some gaps, but also identify some really great projects that are ongoing and that we would like to be amplifying and expanding upon moving forward. Before we move to the final segment of our program, we did have a question. I know there's some questions been coming through online. We are running a little bit short on time, but I was hoping to return to Dr. Aman if she is still available, because we had a question asking what are her hopes for COP27 in terms of water and climate adaptation. Dr. Aman, are you able to answer that question?
Actually, please, could you please repeat a bit about the question?
Yes. So the question came in, what are your hopes for COP27 in terms of water and climate adaptation?
Actually, for our hope as a ministry is to see the adaptation enter the water sector and to have integrated approach. We have a lot of coalition, a lot of initiative. We would like to see more integration and cooperation among different initiatives to focus on the water issues and to integrate all aspects in one big initiative or more coherent one. Also, we would like to see more capacity building and more community to be involved in the different initiatives. So to have the communities involved in the adaptation in different issues, I guess will help the decision maker and help the implementer to have the right decision. So this is personal hope. I hope to have kind of more coordination among different initiatives focusing on adaptation issues.
Thank you, Dr. Aman. Inshallah, that will be achieved in November. And we'll actually hear a little bit more from Egypt right at the close from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and some of the work that they're doing as well. We have one more presentation. Our presenter from the Global Water Partnership, Alex Similabui, has not been able to connect, I believe, but we do have a backup. Hopefully, Danny, you are able to connect. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm going to pull up. Now, Danny is pinch hitting here, and so, Danny, you do not need to stick to all of these slides, but I'll put them up anyways, and just feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, and thanks for the opportunity. Like Ingrid said, I am stepping in for Alex Similabui, who is the Executive Secretary of GWP Southern Africa and the Global Head for Climate Resilience. You can go to the next slide. So we wanted to talk a little bit about investment, and investment specifically as it pertains to Africa for water and sanitation. To start off with a few pieces of information, the delivery of water infrastructure in Africa is lagging behind the continent's economic and social needs. The African Development Bank estimates that $64 billion in water infrastructure investment is required annually to meet the 2025 Africa Water Vision of water security for all. But the actual figure invested stands between 10 and 19 billion per year. In that respect, the water investment program, the Africa Water Investment Program, was introduced with the goal of transforming and improving the investment outlook for water security and sustainable sanitation for a prosperous, peaceful, and equitable Africa. The AIP's objective is therefore to enhance job creation through gender-sensitive investments in water security, industrialization, and climate-resilient development. The AIP supports countries to develop and accelerate implementation of gender-transformative, climate-resilient, regional and national water investment programs and projects, and contributes towards continental efforts on universal access to safe water, sanitation, hygiene, and integration of water security and COVID-19 economic recovery plans. Next slide. Just to review briefly the genesis of the AIP, you'll remember in 2018 there were the outcomes of the joint UN World Bank High-Level Panel on Water, which called for the launch of an Africa Water Investment Program. After that, in 2019, the idea was endorsed by the Governance Council of the African Ministers' Council on Water to transform Africa's water investment outlook through increased partnership and implementation of the AIP. In February 2021, the AIP was then adopted during the 34th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of AU Heads of State and Government in Addis Ababa. And those of you who were in Dakar for the World Water Forum in March of this year, there was the initial launch of that, which was one of the main outcomes of the World Water Forum. Next slide, please. So we all know what the problem is. There's inadequate water investments across African countries. The delivery of these investments in water infrastructure, information, and institutions is below the targets that are required to meet not only SDG 6, but all the other economic growth objectives and social needs of the continent. Next slide. So this is just to recall again, you know, the consequences of what happens when you don't have enough investments. There are Africans that do not have access to clean drinking water. There are those who do not, more than twice, that have lacked adequate sanitation. And all of this, of course, impedes social and economic growth and development. It contributes to a loss of 5% of GDP annually because of this lack of water. And obviously, it's represented by 40 billion hours of time lost that could be otherwise used for productive time, especially from women and youth. Next slide, please. So again, this program aims to close that gap that we've identified in terms of investment for Africa. And the actual gap being precisely 30 billion a year by 2030. Next slide, please. This is just recalling the goal and the objective. Again, once more, to transform and improve the investment outlook for water security and sustainable sanitation, and then to close that water investment gap. And next slide. So how we're going to do that is through these 5 specific points. This launch of the high-level panel at the heads of state level. The development of a water investment scorecard, which is specific to Africa, that is also seeking to fill the gap in information available about water sanitation and investment. The creation of a blended investment facility to leverage public and private partnership financing. The development of climate resilient regional, transboundary, and national water investment programs and project pipelines, and of course, keeping in mind gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. Final slide, please. So all of these different pieces, I know this slide is actually, you can't really read it, but the objective here is just to show that water connects everything. It connects public health, food security, livable cities, energy for all, environmental well-being, and climate action. And by creating linkages across these different AIP support programs, which include not only the high-level political panel, but also the development of the investment scorecard, the creation of a blended investment facility, the place for gender equality within all of this work, and also the regional and transboundary aspects. Through that, we can improve coherence across different sectors and objectives, and increased investments in this water security across all of these pillars are actually very urgently required in order to meet current and future needs of the continent. So I will leave it with that, apologizing that obviously I haven't been able to do it justice that Alex would have done, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Danny, and I really appreciate as you were able to step in at the last minute. With that, we are going to move to the closing segment. Let me just find my final slide here. Yes. Oh, also, hopefully, maybe, Danny, I don't know if you can put it in the chat, but we should put a link to Alex's contact information if folks would like to learn more about the AIP program, because it is a relatively new initiative. But if we could get his contact information in the chat so that people can follow up with him if they have any questions. So, Closing reflections. As I said at the outset, we really see this event as a bridge between COP26 and COP27. And so this is the last time we'll all be together kind of in person in a global format between now and November. And so we are looking towards November. And so we have invited the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to come and to give some thoughts about some very exciting new initiatives that we just heard about today. The AWARE initiative on water, as well as the FAST agriculture and food initiative. So there's so much going on, and we're really excited and happy to have Ms. Manatollah Mustafa from the Department of Climate, Environment, and Sustainable Development within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. Minna. You can also stand if you like.
Also send you a slide if you wish to listen.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll try.
Well, so thank you so much, Ingrid, for your kind introduction and invitation to this really timely event convened by AGWA, GWP, and AAC, the country-led initiative co-chaired by Egypt and UK. And while the water workstream provides important actions for supporting the enhancement of national adaptation and resilience, as informed all day, science still informs us that there is an inextricable linkage between water and climate. More than 70% of the climate hazards are water-related, as identified in the latest IPCC Working Group 2 report. And with that being mentioned, we must reignite our commitment to do more on water adaptation, as there is a clear need for comprehensive and integrated climate plans which recognize water as a critical resource for implementing effective adaptation actions. Dr. Iman from the Egyptian Ministry of Irrigation has already given a glimpse on the activities that COP27 is going to hold on the nexus between water and climate. Wrapping them up quickly, we will be convening in COP27 as Egypt a water pavilion to showcase innovation, implementation, and success stories, in addition to revitalizing and re-energizing many of the initiatives that are already in place and bringing important sectors to the forefront. There will also be a dedicated thematic day on water adaptation, which will hold several initiatives, activities, panel discussions, and expert group presentations. There will also be, which is the most important topic that I'm coming to talk about today, a flagship initiative launched by Egypt on action for water, adaptation, and resilience, which is dubbed under or titled as AWARE. The initiative aims at catalyzing inclusive cooperation to address water as a key to climate change adaptation and resilience, including through partnerships on several operational tools, such as the monitoring systems, information platforms, and specifically early warning systems and early action, so that we would make a linkage with the United Nations Secretary General Initiative to cover 1 billion people with early warning systems. And as a first step, we will start with the most vulnerable communities and ecosystems in the African region. The initiative also will provide, wherever possible, means of implementation and supports countries in water policies and reporting to provide information, as there will be a global water report which will be launched at COP27 onwards with or in partnership with the World Meteorological Organization. And it's important to note here that the different pillars of the initiative and the different ideas integrated are a result of multiple stakeholder and parties consultations that have been held for 2 different rounds in Cairo to actually get informed on what the world would like to see if Egypt launched the Global Water Initiative. And I can see some of the parties who contributed already being present in the event today. So thank you for that. We in Egypt, and perhaps many others in the world, are fully in the implementation phase now, which is defined by enhanced action on the ground and providing assurances that commitments under the UNFCCC Convention and the Paris Agreement are being met, and the pledges that were most recently made in Glasgow are on track to be fulfilled. So we look forward to your contributions to the COP27 initiatives, which we're still taking inputs to them until the 10th of July, and on the different and various water activities that will be taking place in COP27. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mana. Sorry I wasn't able to put the slide up, but really exciting to hear about what you all have planned. And I know, as you said, it's still ongoing and still evolving. So we're looking forward to continuing to input into the work. And again, the reiteration of implementation. We've heard that from multiple speakers today. And I think we've also gotten some good examples of where implementation is actually happening on the ground. And so I'm excited to bring more of this discussion to the COP in November, to join you in Sharm. Inshallah, we will all be able to be there in person and continue this discussion about water adaptation and resilience and how initiatives like the Global Water Leadership Program, the Fair Water Footprint, or the Water Tracker can help countries as they work to implement in a more systematic, sustained way. So with that, I want to thank you all who are joining us online and in person for being here today, and congratulate everyone again on making it through a very, very intense 2 weeks here in Bonn, and I look forward to seeing you all hopefully in Sharm in November. Thank you all so much. Sorry, I would have had to put it on this. I didn't want to stand in front of you.
I did realize that there would nothing be displayed as most of the audience were online, so I sent it to you as a, but you prepared something already, so that's great. You had